Expedia.com. That's right, I was recently using the Expedia website to book a recent trip back to Scotland to visit my family, and I noticed that it was actually a little bit cumbersome to use the UI controls. So in classic demystifying design fashion, I've decided to redesign the whole thing. As you can see, it's pretty decent, you know, there's nothing glaringly wrong with it, but there is quite a lot pulling for my attention, and nothing immediately jumps out to me as the thing that I should really be looking at. We've got the numbers down here that kind of jump out, the controls up here that kind of jump out, but the rest of it's just like a spattering of small text, so I don't really know what incarnation I'm supposed to be focusing on here, and that's kind of the main problem that I'm going to try and solve here, just ultimately making it much more usable, right? Here we've got our brand guidelines as always, a nice little arrangement of blue hues. Their accents are very heavily focused on blues, and they're using an absolutely beautiful typeface called, I think it's Centra number 2, I believe it's called. Yeah, Centra number 2. I'll link to the the website for this font, the people that made it, because it's absolutely such a beautiful font. Look how rounded and clean everything is here. So nice. But here we've got the live redesign ready to roll, as of course we've got our user stories. What are we actually trying to achieve with this design? Ultimately, as you'd imagine, it's just trying to find a flight from one destination to another that fits my criteria. What's my criteria? Well, it's all of those filters you saw on the left, all the controls to really dial in the exact flight that I want to partake in as a traveler. Also want to change locations and departure dates if I'm just, fishing for an interesting vacation spot. I want to filter flights based on various criteria to ultimately serve that first goal I have here. And then when I'm ready to move forward, I want to view a deal and actually just go through and commit to that particular booking. And then maybe download the mobile app to continue searching on the go. Or if I do buy something through Expedia, I'd like to have the mobile app so I can get all the updates about my travel itinerary. So here we've got a little reference image as always. I'm just going to get started and make a brand new Expedia and see how that all goes. So I'm excited to make this happen, and I'll keep you posted as always as I go through. But I'll check back in with you in about, I'd imagine, 2 hours when I'm done. I'll spare you guys having a look at yet another navigation redesign. Let's just skip over that. Honestly, I quite liked the destination and departure date selectors that Expedia had already. I just wanted to add some labels here and make sure that they're much more explicit in the UI flow than they were today. A really quick win for the UX here is adding the ability to clear filters right next to where the user added them in the first place. Putting the clear filter control here is like common practice, and it seems like today they kind of float it somewhere in the middle of the content body, which isn't very intuitive, right? Users can kind of remember that they made the change in a certain location, and that it's intuitive for them to have the ability to reverse that change in a similar location. I really didn't understand why Expedia forced me to choose my departure and returning flight in different flows. From my perspective, there only really is one travel experience, and the departure and return flight are kind of the same thing. So it makes sense for me to kind of see both of them matched together where it's possible, you know? So just putting the departure and the returning flights as line items in each individual deal seems to make a whole load of sense for me as an actual traveler. And this was a mistake on my behalf, which I'm now correcting. Generally, when you're working with light experiences and you want to make white boxes work, it's almost always best to have a subtle gray, off-gray background color in the container element so that the cards can just float on top of it and it looks really clean. It draws users' attention to the card as opposed to the background. Another tip that I've found quite useful over the years is that whenever you're displaying content that you don't have explicit control over, specifically image content, like a company logo or something else, you generally want to put it inside a container that has a solid fill color so that you can at least control the context in which that image exists, as opposed to just giving that image, which again you don't control, way too much control over the visual experience of the component you're building. This is me realizing that there's an opportunity here to float the most ideal option to the top here. Something that would generally fit most people's interests when they're searching for a flight. A good mix of price and number of stops. And that way, when we have one option at the top, users are much more likely to engage with that as opposed to having to scroll through a long list of potential options. When it comes to filtration experiences, my philosophy is that you should give users as many filters as you possibly can, because you simply can't know what sorts of criteria are important to users. However, you will generally know which ones are the most important to a large subset of users, and those are the ones that can be visible by default. Everything else you just hide inside a submenu for users to open and engage with when it makes sense for them. And of course, one of the driving reasons for whether or not a user will engage with a filter is the impact it has on the overall price of the trip. So putting that there as metadata next to the checkboxes is a great idea from Expedia. Gonna keep that. Here I wanted to give users some context around the sorting because it's not really intuitive at a glance, but I'm also realizing that there's not very much real estate and we just don't want to push these flight results any farther down the page, so I end up subduing this into a simple sort by control on the right, and then we can show the users the context when they expand that drop down to select a different sorting option. Here I'm deciding to move the app download call to action over to the left sidebar because really the main utility of this flow is to show potential flight options to users. And it's kind of an anti-pattern to put things in the right-hand container which shows the options, which aren't actually options. Because obviously the designers know that users are going to be spending most of their attention there, but they don't want to see an ad. But of course, I have a weird, interesting relationship with advertisement. It's a necessary function of design, so putting it on the screen still makes sense, but just off to the side and below the filters where users can engage with it if they want to, but it doesn't interfere with the primary user journey. Much like when you don't have control over an image, when an image or icon is supposed to be purely functional in nature, you usually don't want to make it very big. If you still need it to take up a lot of space, you can again add a background component and then have that image live inside that background, which takes up the actual space instead of the image. But you don't want to make things like QR codes really huge. It just pulls a lot of visual attention but doesn't provide any value. And there we have it, Expedia. I love this. This to me is the kind of UI that I would love to hit and then just, oh god, I would just use it would click every little component. Oh, it's amazing. But enough placating my ego here. A lot of people would look at this and then compare it to the original and say, hey, look, you can actually see a lot more results in one screen on the original, right? Everything's much more condensed. But my pushback to that is that when you come to look for flights, you're not looking to find lots and lots of options. You want to see a curated list of the best options. And if I want to continue browsing other options, I can do so. I can scroll, but I don't. Presenting a user with a whole bunch of options at once doesn't necessarily make it easier for them to select one. It's kind of like when you go to get some ice cream and there's 50 different types of ice cream. People spend a long time trying different ones and they're often not really 100% satisfied. They always feel like they might have chosen a better flavor. But if you just curate 5 really interesting different flavors and say, hey, we recommend this one for your tastes, it would be much easier to make that decision. So I really do feel like this UI showing a single recommendation and then of course several other recommendations with little qualitative tags and stuff on there is kind of the way you would want to go to really blow people out of the water and get them actually using this interface. I get the impression that people are going to see the other version, the more condensed version, and just kind of bounce off the page. Just think, oh God, this looks like work to me. But this looks a little more delightful. So let me know what you think. Perhaps I'm just a little bit off the walls here. Maybe I've drank my own Kool-Aid a little too much, right? But I think this is an ideal UI. But of course, everyone has different opinions on this kind of stuff. And as always, if you think there's a crap UI out there that you want me to tackle, please pop it in the comments, and it just might make its way into the feature next week. But until then, have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you next Tuesday.